In League of Legends and the professional level, there's already a tendency for people's careers not to last very long. If you're a high-level Korean pro, you've got maybe a year, maybe a year and a half that you can stay at the very top elite level of the scene. And if you're on a top team, especially where the expectations are to win or to have continued success from what you've had in the past, if you don't perform to that level, then they're going to get rid of you. And there's a very few names that have been able to stay on just for name value in the way that we're used to some of the legacy players in the West, at least up until about Season 4, were able to hang around and have those long careers. And so as a result, because of this short time span, it means that players go from being the young prospect who's got talent to being incredibly good to being a world beat at the top peak of their level, and then they start to drop off and they're out of the scene immediately. And people's usual way of thinking of that, because they just think of the most recent thing that happened, it's called like the recency effect or something, they'll tend to think of that like that's what they'll remember better than other things. And so they'll just remember when they saw that guy dropping off, and they'll assume because he's out of the scene, right, he must be shit now, he never would have recovered. And then unfortunately people, especially the newer people, will then assume his form then must have been what it was like before. So people said before that he was really good, now they were just overrating him. And also there's unfortunately a type of a fanboy, a type of a just a fanboy is the best way to describe it, who unfortunately, if they didn't like that player, tends to try and respin history as though, oh, he was never good. Did you think he was good before? Well, then you don't know what you're talking about. It's just his team made him look good, or nah, he was never actually good. You were just a fanboy of him, and now we've seen him exposed and he's trash. He never was good. Whereas because of the lifespan of these players, which isn't that long, they live for they're like a fucking mayfly. They live for a day comparative to how long we are used to real sports careers lasting like 15 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever. Someone's prime lasting 5 years. This doesn't happen in this game. And so unfortunately, we've got these scenarios over and over and again. And a really obvious example that I'm not obviously going to go into this in this video is Saint Vicious, where so many people have come in during the era when he isn't that good and when he does miss all the smites that they think he was always trash and he was just famous for his personality. No, he was the best jungler in the whole world at one point in time. He was a dominant carry jungler, but that's all been rewritten and rewritten out of history. And admittedly now he's been not that good for a longer period than he was good, but there was a time when he was a very, very good player, and you have to give him his credit, up there with the Diamond Proxies of the world at the time. Now, with that said, the player I'm going to talk about now, Ryu, the player who was the mid laner for KT Bullets, and going back, he used to play for Startail before that, and he was actually a jungler for a little while for Startail, and later on in Bullets he tried being a jungler again just before the end. Now, it's true, KT Bullets, the strength of the team was the team. They had this great team synergy where Ryu, Score and Mafa had stuck together the whole time from Startail onwards, and they were like the core that decided the team and who went in and out of it, and they had some kind of say over it. But this core obviously worked very, very well together. Great communication, great synergy, could apply the strategical aspect, and they weren't super duper amazing players across the board. Then they had Insec, they brought him in as the jungler, and he was this sick carry jungler. But then he had some aspects to his style that were a bit funky, went a bit ham. So they also had Kakao on the other KT team, KTA. So they brought him over and they consolidated the jungle talent so that they had Kakao was the jungler, and he really was good. He was already starting to get, not quite godlike, but a very elite level already. And they put Insec top lane, and he played an unorthodox style of top lane. Anyway, the point I'm getting to is, it's true. If you looked at the team now, you'd look at this team and okay, people would say Insect's really good now, but as a top laner, he wasn't that great. He was just a middle of the pack OGN level top laner, and he'd have some good games every now and then. He'd have a matchup that was good, or his aggression would help with how the team worked. But really, the player that's the star, if we look now at the lineup, is obviously Kakao. Kakao is a jungle god right now. He's sitting as one of the greatest of all time, top 3 of all time, for sure at his position. That's how good his level is, and his resume as a player is very, very impressive if you look at the OGN stats. But unfortunately, Ryu has been written out of history as a good mid laner. Now he's just being called, he was just okay then, and now he's trash, and without KT Bullets he's nothing. And because unfortunately he just recently went to Europe and played in the expansion tournament with Millennium, and yeah, they were disappointing and it wasn't very convincing stuff online, and it looked pretty bad, quite frankly. Now people are going to say, see, he has fallen off, he's total trash. But let me take you back in time a bit, because I want to tell you, I want to rewrite the story on Ryu. And I've given it like the witty title of like the Street Fighting mid, because obviously Ryu's the main character from Street Fighter, the first game, and we think of him as the base character in Street Fighter 2. So the thing with Ryu is, it really is the case that over the last half of 2013, you could make the case for him being the second best mid laner in Korea, and definitely a top 5 mid in the world. I actually feel like if Faker hadn't have existed, we'd be talking about him in even higher terms. He'd have been like a top 3 mid in the world. He might have even been the best Korean mid laner overall. Because if you remember the way 2013 was, beginning of the year, it was mainly about Dade and Faker were coming up and they got titles each. But Dade had his drop-off towards the end. He became less effective in the team, apparently due to internal issues. And then he had his big choke at Worlds, so we kind of forgot about him towards the end of the year. But Ryu took his team to the finals, 1 game from winning, and he obviously got beaten by Faker's SK Telecom. Then they had to meet Faker's SK Telecom in the semi-finals of the winter season, and they gave them the best run of anyone in that season where the SKT didn't go defeated at all. So again, to me, they were the second best team. They couldn't qualify for Worlds because they started too late in terms of they didn't play the winter season with that lineup, and then they had changes, and then they lost to SK Telecom in the final of not only OG and Summer, which denied them a spot, but then of the regional as well. And so you didn't get a team to go to Worlds, and I feel like people never, on an international level, truly got to know who Ryu was. And later on, just to continue the chronology there, later on, okay, yeah, as KT Bullets dropped off in terms of style and some of the players started to underperform. But even then, he went to IEM and he did fine there. Okay, yeah, they did some lane swaps. They didn't always give him mid-lane matchups against Alexic and Xpeke, but he did exactly what was needed. He was still a good, competent player in a team that could go undefeated at IEM as well. So I don't want it billed as he was trash. He always was trash. He's trash now. He's never good at anything. He was overrated. We all only remember him as the guy who got 1v1'd and owned by Faker. Because there's a lot more to Ryu in his story than that. And I'm going to go through some of this. So we'll go by champions first. First thing I think of when I think of Ryu is Zed. Yeah, haha, because he got outplayed on the Zed. No, I think of him as a Zed player because he was a really good Zed player. People don't know that. You know, Monty always gives the stats of like the insane stats that like 17-2 was what Dade was on Zed, and obviously Faker, he had that godlike outplay, and he's had some amazing games on Zeds where he's really dominated the game. Ryu was one of the best Zeds in all of Korea during the summer season of 2013. I remember KT Bullets always used to beat my Blaze team that I used to follow for Flame. When they played against Blaze in that round of 8 match, the quarterfinals of summer, it went a full 5 maps, and in the 5th map, it's blind pick in OGN. So he pulls out Zed. That's what he pulls out. He wins the whole... He's a huge part of why they win that game. He just batters Ambition. And the best part of it was, obviously, Ambition was having like flashbacks and nightmares to the previous season's final, where 3 times in a row Dade had used Zed to just obliterate him and destroy Blaze. So the same thing had happened again, but by a different player who's a Zed player. In the same playoff run, he goes to the semi-finals, he plays Frost. Now, Frost had never finished below the top 4, and they were one of the great teams of all time. He goes into this game, he has a Zed game there, where he goes 10-1-8. He just obliterates them. He rips them apart completely. Veteran team, veteran players. They know how to deal with strong players and other champions. They could do nothing against this. His Zed destroyed them. Yeah, then he got to the final, and then we remember the blind pick there, and he went for Zed, and Faker did one of the greatest plays of all time. An incredible mechanical and just decision-making and intuitive reactive play. Just beautiful. Absolutely incredible. The kind of thing you can show someone from another game and go, this is what's possible in League of Legends, and then explain the mechanics of why that's incredible and what he did there and how he dodged this. Wonderful stuff. But that's because Faker's God. Faker's the best player ever by far. Ryu wasn't a bad player, and even in that game he wasn't a bad player. And that's kind of what we're going to get to here, because another champion that he used during this period was Gragas. In the final there, the first two games of that final, KT Bullets win, and they're 1 game from winning. And it's because of Ryu's Gragas. He was using it in a great way. He'd been wrecking with it all OG and Summer. And in particular, those 2 games there, he was actually outperforming Faker to a degree on this Gragas. It was very impressive stuff. Now, the third champion I have to bring up when I talk about Ryu is Orianna. Now, Orianna, everyone thinks they know how to play Orianna, because since Season 3, even going back into Season 2, if we're being fair actually, it's always been at worst the backup pick. Like, if you're in a dangerous mid lane thing where I'm not sure what they'll do and what they'll go with, screw it, we'll just go on Orianna. That's like the safe one. That's the one you can just farm on. You know you can have an impact in the team fights with the ult. And so every mid thinks they can play Orianna, but the high level of Oriannas. Now, these are a different class. Link can't play Orianna to the degree some of these guys we're talking about can. Now, obviously, Faker's Orianna. It's a champion he's won the most games on. He's got an incredible win rate, like 69% or something ridiculous. He's a god of Orianna. That's certain. That's his signature champion to me. But Ryu was a very good Orianna. The key thing with Ryu is he had a unique quality to how he used the ult that I've never seen replicated or even rivaled in truly how good he was. The difference is Faker had the best mechanics and prediction. So Faker, like most other really good Oriannas, was really quick to put the ult out there. He was quick to fire off that shockwave, grab a couple of people who'd be caught off guard, and he'd bring them in, and then they go in on the fight, pounce and kill them all. And that's the style he's an aggressive Orianna. It's an offensive Orianna. It's not just the defensive one. It's making plays with it. It's grabbing people. And because his skill shots are so good, that's one of Faker's best qualities. He can be fast with it. He can take chances with it. He can gamble with it. Now, what Ryu did and what he pioneered with it, and I still haven't seen anyone else truly embrace this, because it was genius with the style of how KT Bullets played. Ryu would use the Orianna ult with immaculate patience. He would never set the Orianna ult off if it wasn't going to drag people in, if it wasn't well placed. If it wasn't well placed and they went near it but then they went out of it, he just wouldn't set it off. And so what he was able to do, what he was able to figure out, because most people were doing that, they'd throw it out there to try and hit it, and they'd hit immediately. I didn't hit. I missed. They wouldn't throw it out there and go, it's not there. I won't go for it now. Maybe sometimes they would. He went a step further. He thought to himself, wait a second. Everyone in a team fight, when they know an Orianna is playing and they know the ult is up, is afraid of the ult. They don't want to get near it. If they see me throw it out, they're going to move away. So what he purposely used it for, primarily, was just to zone. Like in the fight, he would throw it in a one area of the fight just to zone them, so they had to go round here so they wouldn't go into it, especially feeding back into it. Because he was so patient, they knew that if they went over it, he was going to set it off, and he would get them. His timing was so sick that he was now able to use it to effectively zone, and he'd still have the Orianna all up. So then he could decide the sort of direction of where the battle took, almost like in the way that Anivia can put the wall up and decide whether they go here or there, or block people off. He could do this with the Orianna, and then he was hitting it to an insanely good hit rate because he was so patient with it. He wouldn't just fire it early and take the big gamble. He'd wait till it was a surefire hit, and this was devastating. This was some really impressive stuff. So okay, the Faker problem, we can't talk about Ryu without addressing it. First of all, Faker was not only the best mid laner in the world, the best Korean mid laner in the world. He's playing in Ryu's region and against him at all these key points to stop Ryu potentially winning. Here's the thing, I'm not exaggerating. If Faker didn't exist, Ryu would have won OGN Summer. That's almost for certain. It's almost for certain he would have qualified for Worlds and then been the favourite team to win Worlds. And then, I wouldn't say it's certain, but I'd say it's very likely that he'd have won OGN Winter. So that would be 2 OGN titles and a Worlds title. Now listen, I'm not going to go as crazy as that. But even just be fair to the guy. Let's say he even just won 1 OGN title. Let's say he even just got to Worlds and got a round of 8 or semi-finals. You'd now be thinking of this guy a lot greater. Think of how people think of Uzi I now. You'd be thinking of this guy's career a lot better. Just because of the results would be there. The performance would be there. Unfortunately for him, he ran into the best player of all time, who was the best at his position, who was the best in his country, playing against him every single time in all these tournaments. And then on top of that, what else? Oh, that's right. The guy outplays you in an insane, ungodly fashion in the last game that everyone's paying attention to, and that's all people remember, is that. And they remember it to the degree that they think you were shit on Zed, whereas actually you were a really good Zed player. It was ridiculous. Okay, let's go past Faker. Some of the other people he played. He played against Ambition. This guy, Ryu beating up Ambition, was a key reason why Blaze never got to the semi-finals or beyond again after that sick run in the spring. They got to the round of 8 in summer, they got beat in 5 games. The round of 8 again in winter, they draw KT Bullets again. This time they get beaten, I think it was like 3-1. Again, he's just constantly beating up on Ambition. And remember, Ambition in the spring, before Faker truly emerged, before Dade got to the finals and won, Ambition was the best mid in Korea. He was the national mid, as they call him. He was the one voted for All-Stars. He was the consistent guy. He was the guy with OGN titles, OGN finals. This was the guy. And Ryu just embarrassed him, outclassed him. Ambition couldn't hang. He could have a game here and there. That's why he could go to five games in that other series in the round of 8 in the OGN Summer. But he couldn't overall go to the level of Ryu at this time, and especially not on some of these champions. Then you look at Goong. We all know now that Goong's a very solid player. He's had times where he's bordered on being a great player, being a very effective player, obviously in the spring run of Shield going to the final. But Ryu's been playing him in that spring run where it went to 5 games and Bullets were so close to winning 3-1. He's played him at other times. The thing with Goong was Goong actually wasn't able to fully... Okay, Goong also kind of dominated Ambition a bit. Got the better of that side of it. But he didn't really against Ryu, actually. Against Ryu was able to style on him with Riven, with LeBlanc. And remember, LeBlanc is Goong's champion. Like, it's not really the case that it went this way entirely. It's certainly an interesting matchup, actually. It wasn't... See, it's not like he was only good versus Ambition or he was shit versus Faker. There was a spread of the best mids we're talking about here, and Ryu was definitely holding his own or being above most of them except Faker. Now then, throw in as well, the guy was a shot caller. We all think of the wonderful... It was one of the most attractive, beautiful, just coordinated, synergistic, synchronized styles of all time. The KT Bullet style, this way where they'd pick that moment where they just gambled to go for... Like, we'll go for the Baron now, and they would get a Baron. They'd sneak a Baron in a high-level competitive game in Korea where everyone's gods of vision with the junglers, etc. They could sneak Barons. They could get that fight at the Dragon they wanted. They could know when to split push. It was just beautiful. And who was orchestrating it? Well, okay, they had the unit, they had the long-term unit, but it was Ryu was the man behind the scenes making shot calls. So you have to give him credit for that. People like Faker aren't shot calling. Some of these other great players who you're comparing to don't shot call. Then you look at the international success. Like I say, it's not just the IEM. Okay, MLG International Exhibition in early 2013, they beat Gambit. And I think it was... Who was the other one? I'm trying to think. I think it was Curse they beat in the semi-finals. Yeah, I think that might be it. Then you go to the Asian Indoor Martial Arts Games. That was the one where he was able to play versus World Elite. He was able to play versus... I think it was like Saigon Jokers and Taipei Snipers. So, okay, let's think about that. He's played against Gambit. That's Alex Hitch. And he played against him a bunch of times. Did very well. Play against World Elite. Still the great World Elite. This is like the end of their period of being the gods of China. Messiah, Twisted Fate God, one of the greatest mid laners of all time. He's played against Expeke and Fnatic in the final in the IEM 8 World Championship. He's played against Ambition. This guy has a pedigree and he did work. Just because he didn't get all the results on his resume to really get there, thanks to some of the unfortunate circumstances of when he came up, coming up exactly in SK Telecom's prime. But he has a resume that needs to be respected, and especially some of his play on those champions, Zed, Orianna, Gragas. I think people have rewritten Ryu's story to be this shit player who's not that good, and now he's terrible, he's dropped off. I don't know what his current status is, I don't know how his future will go, but I know that in the past he was a very good player, and he deserves that credit.